So we're just going to be talking to you a little bit today. My name is Veronique Medrano, your wonderful host, also Tejano singer. We don't lie, I promise. Don't worry. Yeah, come in. So pretty much, thank you guys again so much, and we're going to go ahead and start. Of course, everybody likes to say, what was the thing that started first? Conjunto or Tejano? It is the great debate. People think Tejano started first, people think Conjunto started first. It's like the chicken or the egg. Well, I'm going to clear that up for you just real quick. I've been doing research on this for the last 5 years, thankfully, and I've been very blessed to have a lot of different people come out and talk to me about the industry and look up stuff from the National Museum of History. And so I'll just spell that for you real quick. Conjunto came first. And Conjunto music started off and is still considered roots music. So when you're thinking of roots music, obviously it is in line with country and those types of sounds. So it makes sense that migrant workers created music that is considered roots music. Our music started as a seed planted in the farmlands of southern Texas, and it is similar to that of blues or country. At the end of the 19th century, together, Mexican, Czech, and German immigrants worked the farmlands together and shared their musical traditions, blending accordions and polkas with classical Mexican folk music. The fusion yielded irresistible melodies set to lyrics expressing themes of love and loss, mostly loss, but and the instrumentation was set up as follows. You have to remember, these are migrant workers, so they didn't really have a whole lot. They didn't have a little Joe sound where they had every trumpet from here to California. But so they pretty much had a button accordion, came from the Germans. Thank you, Germany. The bajo sexto, the standing bass. How many of you guys know what the standing bass is? It's the big cello-looking thing. So, yeah. Oh, the talaloche. Everybody knows it as the talaloche. So that and a drum kit. Sometimes they would have the drum kit. Sometimes they would just have a guy there with a maraca. It's a toss-up sometimes. But they had all those, and the genre was considered the music of the growing Mexican-American middle class in the 1950s and 60s. At the end of the 60s and into the early 70s, the genre continued to evolve, creating what we now know as Tejano music. And that evolution, of course, you can say, okay, Conjunto split off into a bunch of, like a tree, it's split off into a bunch of branches, and you have regional music, and then you have Tejano music, and Latin folk. So, all that split right there for our area happened. And with Tejano, of course, 60s and 70s, you guys know, the keyboard, the talaloche was replaced with an electric bass, the guitar, or I was trying to remember, the bajo was replaced with an electric guitar. All these changes started happening to create that evolution of sound that we hear today. And of course, it continues to evolve. It always will, especially because of the fact that our genre, from its inception, was a mix of different styles, and so that has been the one thing that has stayed true throughout. Now, I want to say it's been more than 50 years, so let's just leave it at that, because I'm not good at math and I'm not going to count today. So, now while men dominated the genre at its earliest inception, Lidia Mendoza, I don't know if you all know who Lidia Mendoza is, very grateful, also known as La Alondra de la Frontera, the lark of the border, stood out amongst the sea of male singers in the late 1920s. Yes, there was a leading female in the 1920s before any of us ever came out. And she was known, and is still known, as the first lady of Tejano music. She started in 1928 at 12 years old, recording with her family, but it wasn't until 1934 that Mendoza went out as a solo artist, recording 4 songs, including one called Mal Hombre. And by the start of World War II, Mendoza was one of the most famous Spanish-language singers of the Texas-Mexican border region. So this goes from here all the way through I would like to say the Southwest, so all the way through to California, all the areas, because her family were migrant workers. So she would travel through there in her musical endeavors. Something to know about Mendoza is her popularity increased so much so after World War II that she was one of the first females to be going out and playing conjunto music in Mexico, Cuba, and Colombia to over 20,000 people a show. I think the last recorded show was about 50,000. So women have been leading the pack for quite some time. Of course, now entering the late 60s and early 70s, women in the industry would still find it difficult, even after her endeavors, even after her strides, to come in as solo artists. They would still be in the background as lead vocalists, but their names would not be featured on the top of the billing. They would be, a good example is Laura Canales in the 80s. In the late 70s, Laura Canales was a lead vocalist for these three groups before she ended up being a lead vocalist on her own. Snowball and Company, Felicidad, and Los Fabulosos Cuatro. Before forming her own group, Laura Canales and Encanto in 1981, and it wasn't until 1995 that she got her first hit, Si Viví Contigo. The golden age of Tejano was right in that little sweet spot. The 80s, 70s, you got all that big hair. I'm sure you guys seen La Mafia. All those guys, they had this really big hair. You see all the records and you're like, no, you guys were really, really young back then. Like they would come out with like these vest shirts and stuff like that. I'm sure you all know those shirts. Like big afro hair. I wish I could do that. I just do this. It's about as much as I can go. But the golden age of Tejano included women, lead women like Laura Canales, Elsa Garcia, Patsy Torres, and many, many other women. But it would be the younger generation in the 80s, late 80s, going into the 90s, that would blaze a path for what is now considered the new age of Tejano. This, of course, includes Selena Quintanilla, Shelly Lares, Stefani Montiel, Elida Reyna, and many, many more. So, of course, we come to our first panelists on this wonderful morning. Hopefully you guys are awake. Shelly Lares, aka Little Miss Dynamite. Let's give her a big round of applause. So, Little Miss Dynamite, otherwise to me personally, she's known as my personal Wonder Woman. Started in 1984 and has been one of the top females in the Tejano music industry. As both a major record label artist and owner of her own indie record company, Shell Shock Records, she's garnered numerous Tejano music awards such as Female Vocalist of the Year, Female Entertainer of the Year, Vocal Duo of the Year, and a nominee in both the domestic and Latin Grammys. And mind you, I'd like to point out, this is just something for me that I'm very proud of, is that she attained one of the nominations for Grammys as an independent artist, not as a major label artist. Like that. Right. Aside from that. And that's hard, and that's what you all know. So, on top of being one of the youngest artists to be inducted into the Tejano Roots Hall of Fame. I'm not going to say how old she was when she got it. I'm just going to say she was young. So, of course, big round of applause to Shelly Lares. So, the first question, of course, we're going to ask you is to tell us something that fans don't know about when you started.
Oh, gosh, okay. A lot of people think that it was in the early 90s, like 95 area when I was, starting out. That's really when I went full-time was in 1989, right out of high school. But I started recording at 10 years old. I recorded with a big orchestra band, which had, trumpet, saxophone, big orchestra. And they were called Hot Tamales. That was the name of the band in San Antonio. And the only reason that I joined the band is because my sister was getting married and they were playing for the wedding. The reason they were hired is because my brother-in-law loved David Mares, and David Mares was the singer for Hot Tamales at the time. But the schmuck quit the band before my sister's wedding, and so my sister sister wanted me to do a song with the band, and they were a Tejano band, and I had never sang Tejano music before. So I wound up doing an Olivia Newton-John song called Let Me Be There. And I remember getting on stage, going and rehearsing with the band, and my parents were with me, of course. We walk into the band room. I start to sing the Olivia Newton-John song, and I just remember they were all looking at each other, and I didn't know if I sounded bad or what was going on, but they called my dad that night and asked if I could do a performance with them, that song, at another engagement prior to my sister's wedding. So I went and performed on the south side of San Antonio. I did the song, and all these people came to the front of the stage, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. But I recorded my first 45. I didn't say 8-track. My first 45 with Hot Tamales, and it was a song called Break It To Me Gently. And my mom wrote the Spanish lyrics for that. And I recorded about 5 45s with them until I went. I was with them for 4 years, and the furthest we would go was Dallas. And I remember telling my dad after 4 years was, Dad, I want my own band. I want to do this outside of Texas. I want to take it more seriously than these guys, because they were just kind of, I'm not trying to sound bad, but they were okay with just making beer money for the weekend. They had regular jobs. And so that's what we did. My mom saved up my money within those 4 years. I would only make $10 a night. And they would pay me in ones because they would think I would think it was more money. But I was smarter than that. I knew how to count. And we bought my own equipment, and Mom and Dad we would lug around my equipment in the back of a pickup truck. So I've been doing it for 34 years now. So it's been a long.
Now talking about your touring experience, I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, especially as a female, and why it is important from your experiences, why has it been important to tour outside of your comfort zone, to tour outside of the region that you're in?
It's a lot more difficult for the girls in this industry. We are under the microscope consistently, from the way we dress, our weight, our sound. And I love our male musicians. I love them to death, but they can be very overweight and ugly as heck, and people will still go in the front of the stage. But with us women, it's like, she dyed her hair too dark.
Tell them how you really feel.
Well, y'all already know I don't pull any punches, right? Okay. I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest with how it is for us. So I remember when I first signed my first record contract with Manny Guerra at age 17, I recorded my first record, my 45, with Manny Guerra at 10. But he felt I was too young at the time. So he waited another 7 years. And he told me, he's like, if you're going to make this work, because it was either going to be college or music. And I wanted to go to college, but I wanted music. And he told my parents and myself, if this is going to work, you have to do it full time. And you have to go outside of San Antonio. You have to go out of Texas. Because you're compared a lot also when you're first starting out. So, of course, Selena had 4 years ahead of me. So I was being compared to her. I was in her shadow for many, 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 many years, as you may know. And so that's what we did. And the importance of that is because I had to make a name for myself. And that's how I wanted it. I didn't want anyone, I was taught to work for myself, work from what I have. I didn't want anyone to hand anything to me. I didn't want them to hand me a bunch of equipment, a nice bus, because in the long run, it wouldn't belong to me. It would always belong to someone else. And I may have not had the best of things or the high-end bus or equipment, but it belonged to me and I worked for it at the end of the day. But I didn't get to tour the world until, I was with Steph and Elida as Las Tres Divas. And that's when we went to Guam and Japan and Korea. And little did we know that our music was being heard. Japanese loved Tejano music. And, we were like freaking out. It was like, okay, we did in Okinawa, we did a big festival. And the Japanese were just enjoying every minute of it. But it's about making a name for yourself. And as a female, to the new artist, you just gotta have a thick skin. You gotta handle things in a professional manner as well as you can. But the fans, the Tejano music fans, they know when you're real. They know. And if you're just yourself with them,
I mean, because I consider you guys like family. You know, I see y'all every year. You know, we bond because we love the same genre, and we represent it, and so do you. So, but if they know when you're real, and if you are, then how can you not be successful? You know, but you got to handle it like a business first and foremost.
So I know I've asked you this question before, but I loved your answer for it. So I'm going to ask it to you again. And it'll probably
remember what I said.
No, it's okay. You'll remember. You got all heated up about it.
Oh, man.
What is your take on the idea that Tejano music is a limiting genre?
Oh, man. I mean, for lack of, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that pisses me off when I hear people say that. The reason I feel that way is because I feel that Tejano music, not because it's who I am and what I've done for 34 years and it's my life, Tejano music is the only genre where most of the artists can do any kind of music. Any kind of music. Because I'm not knocking country, I'm not knocking jazz, but can they play a polka? Can they sing mariachi? Can they do salsa? Can they do pop? You know, I mean, even the women that are here are so versatile. I mean, you throw any song, any genre at us, and we're gonna do it. And you know, I told the story, and I don't know if that's the story she wants me to tell, but I was signed with a big label called Sony Records for 5 years.
Yes, that's the story.
And I was signed with Sony, and I've always loved doing country. Country's like another favorite of mine. And for many years, we've talked about doing a country CD, and I've always felt God has a time and a place for everything, and it just hasn't been the time. I got an opportunity to record with Vince Gill, who's one of the biggest country artists. And I got to go to Nashville and record with him, and I met a lot of country artists, and I was in the best facility in Nashville. And they wanted me to meet the head of the country part of Sony, Mr. Johnson. That was his name. I wasn't making it up like Mr. Smith or Juan. So Mom and I and Dad and I walk into this huge office, you know, gold albums, platinum albums everywhere, and it's kind of intimidating. But you know, I see it as, you know, I'm walking into a place that, you know, is not familiar to me, but I was very confident in who I am as an artist and in my talent and my genre, so I wasn't letting it get to me that way. So I walk in and we're sitting there, we're kind of just talking. He wants to get to know me a little bit, and their artists were Alan Jackson, and those were their A artists. They have A and B, C artists. And he sits back and he says, so, tell me what you know and you think about this Emilio guy. He's like, yeah, I hear he's trying to do country music. And I swear to y'all, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I felt like he was talking about my brother, you know. And I knew when he was coming, and basically he was saying he's not good enough for Nashville, is basically what he was telling me. And he was telling the wrong person because I wasn't, you know, my mom and dad already knew because they raised me that way. But I just said, let me ask you, Mr. Johnson, who is your top artist? Alan Jackson. Okay, well, you know, has Alan Jackson ever been able to perform a mariachi song? Can he reach audiences that Emilio has reached? And I went on and on and on and on and on. Needless to say, I never met Mr. Johnson again after that. But I didn't care. I didn't care because I felt like, you know, I'm not going to sell out. I'm not going to come and want to be somewhere that I'm not welcomed. You know, I'm not. I'm not going to kiss anybody's butt to like me or to accept me. I'm not better than anybody else, but nobody is better than me as well. You know, we all have our own ways of shining. God created us all differently, and we all have our gifts that He's given us. So, I mean, that pretty much was it. But that was my first and only time I ever stepped foot in the office. But like I said, I didn't care. And I'll defend my fellow peers till the day I die. And hopefully they do the same for me. But, you know, that's just my family.
Well, that of course this is the first half of Shelly's portion. She'll come back and we'll ask her some more questions. But next up is our wonderful other diva,
Stefani Montiel. Stefani is another top female artist in the industry that has made her mark on the industry since her first album released at the tender age, am I correct, at 9?
I actually recorded my first 45.
45.
At the age of 3.
Oh, at the age, okay, well then never mind. My information was all wrong. But her creativity has allowed her to blend Tejano music with many other genres, which I'm sure you guys have seen at many of her shows. She has a ridiculous range, ridiculous, like, oh my God. Stefani has devoted herself to organizations that are vital to the support of artists such as herself. This is something I really wanted to push out because it's not something that's widely known. So I'm gonna toot your horn a little bit for you. She has served for 10 years as a governor for the Texas Chapter Board of Governors for the National Academy of Arts and Sciences. So give people a layman's terms of what that means. The Grammys. She has served as the chapter's vice president and is the first Hispanic female to hold the coveted national trustee position for 5 consecutive years. Along with that, she has also been a 6-time nominee in the domestic and Latin Grammys.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, of course you can.
2 of those nominations were on my independent label as well.
There we go. I only have so much bio, girl. You can send me more. So, of course, I'm going to go ahead and ask you the same question about your start in the industry. Something that people aren't aware of. Of course, you're just telling us now. Of course, correcting me, which is awesome. When you started, and go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know if many of you know, but I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised, and my father was a musician there, had a band, and listened to Tejano music, played Tejano music, so I grew up listening to Tejano music. You know, we mentioned Lidia Mendoza. She was one of the people that I loved to listen to when I was younger. I loved to listen to Laura Canales. My dad was a big fan of Little Joe and Ruben and the Royal Jesters, and you know, these were songs and bands that I grew up listening to. And then when I kind of got a little bit more involved in Tejano music, I started, you know, touring with my dad at the age of 3. I really did. We were out on the road. I would go with my parents. You know, I would start singing, and Chel says she got $10. She got paid $10. I got paid in maraschino cherries. So they were totally pulling one over on me, but I was cool with it. I was like, all right, just give me a Coke with 12 cherries and we're good. So I would sing for hours, and I loved it so much. I would steal my father's records of all his Tejano artists, all the Tejano albums he had, and I would sit in my room and listen to these albums and just learn the lyrics. And of course, I would say them all wrong. I can't even tell you what I would say because it would be really embarrassing. Something about, never mind. No, but you know, as I went along, my family's a very musical family. I have uncles, aunts. You know, my grandfather was an accordion player, and you know, it was just very easy for me. I didn't even realize that you could be something other than a musician because my whole family was musicians. So I thought, you know, I just knew that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And you know, my dad was fine with that. He said, you know, you can tour with us, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to finish school, and then once you finish high school, you can decide from there where you want to go. And as soon as I graduated high school, I'm like, I'm moving to Texas. I'm going. And that was just, you know, because I knew that Tejano music was where my heart was. So I really, you know, started going to San Antonio, started doing promotions out there. I got signed very quickly. I signed with Capitol Records, and I was able to do a couple of singles with them. And then I moved on and recorded with Sony Disco, so I signed with them, and I signed with them for 7 years. After that, I started my own record label, World Records, and then now I'm currently signed with BMB Music Group. So.
Now, I really want to touch on the behind-the-scenes aspect, because I don't think a lot of artists do the front end, which is the performing, the touring, all that stuff. But there's not a lot of artists that go behind it. And when we say behind it, that means being a part of recording academies and being a part of their decision boards, pretty much, and seeing what's out there. So with your involvement in these organizations, what is your take on where a new generation of women need to do musically within our industry to move things forward, to get that respect for our industry?
Well, that's the thing, that's really why I got involved in the Grammys. I started going to meetings, and then one thing led to another, and I was asked to join the board, and I was on the board for 10 years. And then from there, there was really no Hispanic representation on our local board, which was in Austin, Texas. We have our meetings in Austin. And it was just, it was very strange to me that we didn't have anyone representing Tejano music. So what I did was I first started on the board, and then I was asked to become, to run for a trustee position, which is very, very difficult. Because there's people like Dave Cause, Jimmy Jam, people from the hip hop world. Jermaine Dupri was on the board when I was there. The biggest of the biggest producers, artists, songwriters. I mean, whoever you could imagine, they're on that board. And I just thought to myself, here's this girl from New Mexico that's trying to represent Tejano music, and I'm trying to, be the voice of our industry really right now. And I got the position. And I was freaked out, completely freaked out, because I walked into my first meeting in Los Angeles, California, and I walk in and see one of my favorite producers, which is Jimmy Jam, and that's, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis were Janet Jackson's producers, and I was just like tongue-tied. I couldn't talk, I was shaking, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into here? But it turned out to be such an incredible experience, because it really did give our industry a voice, and it gave us an opportunity to keep our category. And that's the thing, and now we do not have a category in the domestic Grammys, which is the American Grammys, which is the board that I served on. And not due to non-involvement, but it's really hard because a lot of the artists don't know how to submit their product. So even though we had artists who were recording projects, they weren't submitting them to the Grammys because they didn't know how. So that's another thing that we really need to work on in our industry, is educating our artists, because it is very difficult in this day and age with all the technology and all the things that we have to do. So like I said, it was a difficult thing, and also that being said is that they said that Tejano music is Mexican music, it's Latin music, so it only belongs in the Latin Grammys, which is not true, because Tejano music is an American art form. It was started here in the United States. So for me, that was something that I really tried hard to push, but it was very difficult because we had to differentiate between, well, what is conjunto music, and how is that different from Tejano music, and how is that different from, it just went on and on and on. It was just like,
I told you guys, it's the tree of life.
Oh my God.
But it's so important for everybody to educate themselves, especially the women, because a lot of the times, us women are doing everything on our own. We have our families that help us out. The guys kind of, have people that kind of help them left and right, or they have managers and things like that. But us women, we tend to keep our families very much involved and very close to us. So it's very important for you to just, always educate yourself, try to find out, try to get involved, and, talk to each other, help each other out, because we need to support one another. And this is why we kind of even created the Finding the Next Thing with Tejana, because we wanted to inspire, we wanted to mentor, and we want to help women in general, because we need, we really need that help.
Now, yes. Not so close. Now, I thought it was really interesting because I saw this go up on your page, and I really wanted, I know you talked about it a little bit on your page, but I wanted you to get a little bit more into it. You touring as an artist, but also being a mother. Because there was a post, I think if I'm correct, that had, it was a Mother's Day post, if I'm correct, I don't even know when you put it up, but it was you and your baby girl. Like she was tiny, tiny, tiny. And so, describe that experience, because obviously, you can't just be an artist. Some people, they're mothers as well, and so that, how is that added on top of what you do as a touring artist? How do you separate the two? Or how do you put them together?
Well, I'm not gonna lie, it was difficult. And my baby girl is now 21, which we just celebrated her 21st year day. It wasn't planned. It wasn't planned that way. I was touring, I was in the middle of everything, and I got pregnant, and my husband is Gabriel Zavala, who's also a music producer. And it was like, man, what am I gonna do now? And it was just like, wow, I really have to sit back and think about this. And I continued to perform up until I was, I think it was 8 months pregnant. So I was out there still performing, because this is my only source of income. I had no other source of income. I didn't go to school after I, went to high school. I started singing Tejano. I moved to Texas and I uprooted my entire family to go live in San Antonio. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a rough road. And to be completely honest, 6 days after I had my daughter Elida, I was performing again because I had to make that money.
That's that picture. If you find, I love that picture, and I hope that you put it up again, because that is definitely the strength of women in the industry. Is that, hey, she had her baby, and she went back out and performed literally 6 days later. I testament to you.
Girl, I had curves everywhere, big old bouncer. I was like, girl, I gotta get that money. It didn't matter, but and I love music so much that like my family is a part of it. Like I just mentioned, my parents, have always been on the road with me, and then being that Gabriel, my husband was on the road as well. It just made sense to take our kids on the road. So we have our daughter Elida and our son Jalen, and they were on the road with us since they were born. I mean, literally, we were out on the road and they were touring with us. Luckily, my parents, like I said, were there to help me. My mom, would sit in the bus and take care of the kids, or she'd be selling merchandise with one kid on one thing and one sleep in the back. And, I mean, we did what we had to do, and we survived somehow. All these years, I take a look back now and I'm like, wow, Elida's 21, my son just turned 18 and graduated high school, and I don't know how, the time just flew by, it's crazy to think about it, but, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I love my kids, I love the music, and I love that we were able to expose our children to Tejano music as well, because I think that's so important, is to expose our children to the industry, to the music, and to the culture.
So big round of applause for our other Wonder Woman on the stage. These are all very strong women. If you haven't figured that out now, you're going to figure it out by the end of this panel. And so I hope that you check out all these ladies. They will all have booths in the main expo hall. If you want to talk to them further, get pictures, all that good stuff. Now next up is Michelle Garcia, otherwise known as Michelle Chel, correct? That's her pseudonym. Michelle Garcia is a Corpus Christi native, and at the age of 17, had shared the stage with such notables as Vicky Carr, Jose Feliciano, Cheyenne, Freddie Fender, and many more. And she also has pictures with all of them, just in case y'all can verify. Her career started as an international singer, before coming into the industry.
Right. My story's a little different, yes.
Yes, and I will let you share it. But she has had over 30 years in the industry, but she's not only an artist, she is also currently the CEO of one of what I consider one of the major labels here in the Tejano music industry, Hacienda Records, and out of Corpus Christi. So a big round of applause to Michelle. And so I'm going to let you go. You already know where we're going to go. Let's go. Let's go. Tell people what we don't know.
Well, my story's a little different. I did a demo when I was 13, and I did it with Rick Garcia. And he was the producer for Lisa Lopez. I don't know if y'all remember Lisa Lopez, but she had a hit called Si Quieres Verme Llorar at that time. And the producer liked it, and he said, you know what, we're going to produce a song. And so we did the song, and it hit. It got #1 in a lot of places all over the United States. And so by the time I was 16, I signed the first international contract worldwide with CBS Records. So I was the first Tejano, or Tejanita, to come out of Texas. Even Lisa Lopez, she was signed with Hacienda Records, and we licensed her out to another company in Mexico. But I signed a worldwide deal, and they sent me to Mexico City to live. So I lived in Mexico City for about 3 years, and I got to tour all over the world, Santo Domingo, Puerto Rico, all over Mexico, and I got to tour with Cheyenne, Ana Gabriel, Timberiche, just a lot of artists. So I immediately jumped into the international market, even though my roots were here in the Conjunto Tejano market. And it's funny how you said earlier, Conjunto came first. When Hacienda Records opened, we started off with Isidro Lopez, we started off with Tony de la Rosa. These were all great accordionists, legendary artists. And that's how Hacienda started. And then that was like 1978, 79. And then in the studio, the music started evolving. They started bringing in the keyboards. Then we had La Movida. Then we had Romance. All these artists, Gary Hobbs, Emilio, Graham, they all started at Hacienda Records, which I'm so proud to say my father and my uncle Rick had worked so hard to develop the industry, both the conjunto side and the Tejano side. So right now, Hacienda's, I guess, for 39 years, and next year will be our 40 years in the business, as we are considered a major recording label. So I'm really excited about that. And so, but as an artist, like I said, I started directly into the international field. I immediately got moved out, and I started touring the world. And about the time I was 21, I was with CBS Records at the time, maybe 22, I ended up in a lawsuit with my label. And that is very, very hard. It's a very bad thing to do, but it just ended up that way. There were a lot of changes in CBS Records, which affected me as an artist. So at that time, we were in court for many years, and I had to pull out of the music industry, in which I came home. I had not had time to date, to do anything. All those years, from the time I was 15 to 22, I was always on the road doing something. So when I came home, I actually started dating, I ended up getting married, and then I had a child. And so when the lawsuit was over, I had to make some decisions. Do I go back to music, or do I take the kids on the road, which is very hard to do, or do I just kind of wait it out? And I actually chose to go back on the road, and I left my son with my mom. I went back to Mexico, and that's when all the killings started. And they started beheading artists and killing them on stage. And my son was pretty sickly at the time. So I came back to the States, and I decided to just stay home and take care of my son because he was sickly. I couldn't take him on the road, it wasn't an option. So I came back to the States, I took some time off, and I've been back and forth throughout the years. And now I'm back full blast, but I'm more at the Tejano Conjunto artist, and I'm actually working with several artists. Hacienda has made a full circle. We started and we launched the Legends of Today. And like I said, we talked about Dave Lee, Graham, Steve Jordan, we launched them, okay? And now they're all legendary. So now we have made full circle, and we are back looking for the legends of tomorrow. So we have lots of new talent. We are producing artists right and left. We have, I guess, 20 artists right now. In fact, let me mention that you can go to haciendaradio.com and you can download 40 songs today free. It's going to be out to all the public for 2 days, for 48 hours. 40 songs free for you to download, Conjunto and Tejano. So we're doing a lot of things. And the nice thing about the blast that we did, several of the artists are new. And let me tell you, we started out with great talent 40 years ago. We have great talent today. When you hear these songs coming out, we got Magnifico Siete, we got Explosión, we just got so many good groups, so many great songs. You're gonna love it, yeah, you're gonna love it. And of course we had to put some legendary artists in that blast as well, so we got some of the classics in there as well.
So, being the level that you're at, as a female, as a CEO, as an artist, how, and we mentioned this across the line, this has been something that's come up, and I have not egged it on, it's actually come up on its own, but in your view, how important is an artist's image in the industry?
Oh my gosh, it is super important. And when you reach that level, like for instance, because I was touring at the world, and I was with, there were Flans, Timberiche, my executive producer would call me almost every other day. And are you dieting? Are you working out? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't wear this, you can't wear that, you have to say this. So yeah, the pressure was huge, and it was constant all the time. In fact, it's so ironic because after I ended up in a lawsuit, my executive producer went to Capitol EMI, and Selena was hanging out. She came over to my house, and she's like, hey, do you know this guy? His name is Jose. And he called me, and I was like, yeah, that was my executive producer. She said, well, he called me, and he wants to sign me. And I was like, oh my God, this guy, he's the bomb, he's the best. You need to sign with him. And sure enough, she did. And he took her to the international level. But the beauty was, when he took me to the international level, he took me as an international artist, doing pop and ballads, okay? No Tejano allowed, because in that days, you didn't take Tejano to Mexico. The girls didn't do that. So the beautiful part is when he signed Selena, he actually took Tejano to the world. And that made a huge difference. So that was great. That was really good.
And so, from your personal observations and or experience, what are some of the ways, subtle or overt, male and female artists are treated by industry professionals like media, radio, producers, and record labels. You just said dieting. I'm sure that's already one. So we can cut that one out. But something that, I mean, that's really important that you feel does need to be addressed, especially as women in the industry.
Well, and you know, something that the girls said here, you know, you gotta be yourself. And there is so much pressure. There really is, again, in the looks and in the dieting part. Even I, as an artist, because I was touring so hard and I had so much pressure, I kind of ended up on the side where I was having issues mentally because they had so much pressure on me to look good and to be thin. So, you know, that's always been a bad part for us women in the industry. But that being said, today there are more artists that are speaking their mind, females, and that are saying, this is who we are, this is how we are, and accept us as we are. Because we are talented, Now, the other thing that I do want to mention is, as a female, it is hard in the industry. It is very hard in the industry. And some of your promoters and radio people try to take advantage of that. And some of the girls, and I don't recommend that they do this, they let them. And that's not good. We have to be strong, and we need to say, no, you look and respect us as women and as business partners, not as a toy that you're going to try to play with or something. So, you know, we all have to stand together and make sure that we are beyond reproach, that we demand respect and we are treated properly. And it is hard. It is really hard.
So, a big round of applause to our wonderful, wonderful Michelle Garcia, otherwise known as Michelle Chel. You will see her at her booth at the Hacienda, right next to the Hacienda Records booth. In case you guys